This is a time for justice. Welcome to today's show. I wanted to cover the train derailment. I know it's been a few days since this story broke, but obviously I've been watching this story. I've been seeing the horror stories that have come out of there. Some people don't even believe it's real. Some people do. But there's just too much stuff surrounding this. Too much obvious stuff that needs to be covered. And again, you start with your government completely ignoring an event like this, where they literally had to evacuate a town, where they had the military there. They pretty much were in martial law over this train derailment. Now, if you haven't heard the story, I'll show you some clips here, because what this is really about is contaminating the water. We've all talked about the food supply, what they're doing to the supply chain, how they're slaughtering chickens. They're doing all this stuff. We saw the cattle tip upside down, 10,000 cattle last summer because of climate change. They're killing off the food supply chain. But the other thing they need to kill off is the water supply. Because, believe it or not, water's maybe a little bit more important than even food, because you can go a while without food, but you can't go a while without water. So we all look at it and we say, hey, all right, how are they going to go after the water supply? Well, this is a perfect way, because not only did the train derail in Ohio, and now they're talking about the Ohio River being contaminated. The government's not even releasing any information about water contamination to these poor people who are living in this area, who are afraid to even drink their tap water, because that's how ridiculous and what scumbags we have in office in this country. I mean, they ignore every single issue. I don't understand how these people aren't impeached if this was a real government. I mean, impeach them. They don't do anything. They don't talk about any of this stuff. We're talking about a catastrophe. This is a chemical catastrophe. So what happened is the train derailed. It had some toxic chemicals on the train. So our government decided to do a controlled burn of the toxic chemicals. Thus, giant mushroom smoke clouds, black clouds go into the sky, polluting the air. Animals in the area dying, fish in the water dying. And it's spreading all the way to the Ohio River, where they could potentially poison the water there. And that's the supply chain for a lot of surrounding states to have clean drinking water. That's what you call a problem. But our government decided to do a controlled burn of the toxic chemicals, not to mention the fact that we had another derailment in Houston where there's hazardous materials, prompting Union Pacific to monitor air quality at the site of the crash. And they're doing the same thing. So when you think about this stuff, how do you think they're going to poison the water? Right? I mean, somebody might say, hey, why don't they just poison it? Why do they need to tell anybody? All right. Well, this is probably an easier way for them to do it. And I'll show you more stuff about it, especially how conveniently a movie came out on Netflix, which I'm sure anyone following the story's already heard about this, called White Noise. It has the same exact plot. This isn't like a plot where you're like, you really could think about this and like, oh, you'd be like, oh yeah, why didn't somebody make a movie about it? It's a very bizarre situation. The fact that a movie just came out about it just shows you, because we know the predictive program. We knew it with Contagion. All the movies that have come out, the Outbreak movies, all of it. This is how sigil magic works. This is how the occult works. They show you in advance what they're doing. But let's take a look at some of the stuff going on in these towns. It's absolutely horrific.
The other big story tonight in Ohio, growing concern about the toxic fallout after that train crash earlier this month. Residents in the area are complaining of sore throats and headaches after chemicals were released during the controlled burn of the derailed train cars. Officials are adamant that there's no threat to human life, but Ohio's Natural Resources Department revealed an estimated 3,500 fish were killed. Officials continue to test the air, water, and soil nearly 2 weeks after the derailment.
It's been 12 days since the fiery derailment of a train carrying hazardous chemicals through East Palestine, Ohio, and the planned burn to prevent a potentially catastrophic explosion. Residents worry about what's still in the air, soil, and water of their rural community.
Don't tell me it's safe. Something's going on if the fish are floating in the creek.
Ohio officials confirming some 3,500 fish died in local waters in the days after the derailment, but insist extensive testing shows there's no threat to other wildlife or humans. They say there's only anecdotal evidence of residents getting sick and no confirmed connection to the hazardous chemicals aboard the train.
I definitely have a right to know what was on that train.
Still, for the first time, state officials suggested residents returning to the evacuation zone use bottled water, especially if they have a private well, while testing continues. The governor was asked if he would return home if he lived near the crash site.
I think that I would be drinking the bottled water. I would be alert and concerned, but I would probably be back in my house.
An answer leaving some residents with mixed emotions.
I feel about 80% safe.
Ben Ratner and his family live half a mile from the crash site. Their kids are back in school after being out for a week. It sounds like you're still worried.
I think more so worried for the long term.
Now to that Ohio train derailment turned chemical spill and its impact on drinking water. We know Louisville Water is currently monitoring the spill, bringing in scientists to detect possible chemicals in our water, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, the impacts closer to the spill, where neighbors say they aren't getting the information they need.
Linda Murphy lives in East Palestine, roughly 3 miles from Ground Zero and just up the hill from Leslie Run Creek.
There were several dead fish floating at multiple locations along Leslie Run.
The Murphys have well water, but right now they're not touching it.
That's what we bathe in, that's what we drink, that's what we cook with, and that's what I also give to my animals. So it was a major concern, and they could not reassure me that the water was safe to drink. They didn't say it wasn't, but they absolutely refrained from saying that it was.
Linda got one of her horses out of town, but Bert refused to step onto a trailer.
Obviously, it might not be instantaneous. Where there's a result, this could be long-term for years and years.
Their neighbors, Joe and Amanda White, worry about their well water too. They just returned home after a night away with a case of bottled water to share with their golden retriever, Murphy.
Our well's 300 feet down. If it could have got into our wells in our drinking water.
Yeah. Or how long, if it's not in there now, is it going to be in there in a week? Is it going to go, because everything's going to seep through the ground. It has to go somewhere.
The Ohio EPA tells me they have not seen anything at this point to suggest private wells would be impacted. Groundwater protection plans will be considered as part of long-term remediation. As far as the water in streams, the Ohio EPA says environmental contractors are taking water quality samples daily, with results expected in the coming days. They've also put up earthen dams in a stream close to the derailment to capture contaminants.
I want my water tested, every week. At least every week for the next few months until we get a nice, recorded record of several tests that says it's free and clear of anything.
Linda wants long-term water testing too for her safety and peace of mind.
I would like someone to reach out and reassure us that, yeah, it's safe, but do I wholeheartedly believe that? No. But ongoing testing down the road, not only today, but in the future, and a relationship moving forward where we can be confident.
I'm News 5 investigator Tara Morgan.
And back here at home, Louisville Water says our water is safe to drink right now, but they're anticipating a plume of chemicals to reach us after leaking into the Ohio River during that chemical spill. Louisville water experts say the chemical involved is used to produce plastics and resins. The biggest impact, they say, would actually be the smell of the water. They're monitoring the system in the Ohio River, has detected small bits of these chemicals, but the team says that they are sure they pose no risk to us.
So, again, your government, which cares all about the people in Ukraine and things like that, doesn't care about its own citizens, clearly. And when you're doing something like this, this is like chemical warfare that they could just get away with because they could be like, what? A train crashed. We didn't do anything. A textbook says that we're supposed to burn out the toxic chemicals. But in reality, this is like an assault on the citizens. They're breathing in this air. Our government went into these towns, or this specific town in Ohio, East Palestine, and they took over people's businesses. They threw them out. They threw everyone out of their home and threatened to arrest them if they didn't leave their home because of the toxic chemicals in the air. And what else were they doing while they were there? Because they weren't testing the water supply for the citizens around there, threatening arrest on people. And who's to say that this burning of the toxic chemicals, they say officials decided to conduct a controlled burn of the toxic chemicals contained within the train cars last week to prevent an explosion that could potentially cause more harm. The train cars contain human carcinogens like vinyl chloride and other toxic chemicals. The chemicals began negatively impacting the environment, such as causing hundreds of fish to die in the Leslie Run stream in East Palestine and harming various other species such as foxes, coyotes, and birds. Yeah. But they won't tell you what it's doing to the humans, will they? Is it going to take a little bit longer for the human beings in that town to actually have it hit them right? They're not going to croak on the spot like an animal would, a small bird or a fish. So say 6 months from now, these people start getting sick. The government won't take responsibility for it. The government and CNN and all these garbage liberal media outlets, they're not going to report on it and be like, hey, we're following up in East Palestine. Look at all these people that got sick. People getting cancer, people dropping dead. They're having all sorts of mutations, breathing problems, respiratory issues. Oh, no. They'll just completely ignore it and say, oh, yeah, they died from, the outbreak or something else. So conveniently, as always, like I mentioned earlier, we have a movie that just came out in 2022 called White Noise. Get ready for it. Here's the trailer because it's the same plot. A derailed train crashes off the train tracks. What ends up happening? Oh, chemical waste flies over the whole town. It's an airborne toxic event. You'll see the people in the hazmat suits. Again, mass evacuation, which leads to traffic jams, which leads to people being quarantined. Take a look.
Wake up, we have to leave. 5 more minutes. No more minutes.
Okay, roll film.
Would you like that a protein?
That stuff causes cancer in laboratory animals, in case you didn't know.
Either I chew gum or I smoke.
What are these children, yours?
That's mine from wives 1 and 3. There's Babette's from husband 2. Wilder is ours. We're each other's 4th.
Life is good, Jack. I hope it lasts forever.
Let's watch a sitcom or something.
No! They're calling it the Airborne toxic event.
It won't come this way.
Will we have to leave our home?
Of course not.
How do you know?
I just know.
Okay, what if it's dangerous?
Evacuate all places of residence.
We have a situation.
Do sheep have lashes?
Ask your father.
We're going sideways.
Dad, do sheep have lashes?
Doesn't anyone want to pay attention to what's actually happening? I wish there was something I could do. I wish I could outthink the problem.
There are 2 kinds of people in the world. Killers and dyers. Most of us are dyers.
Right now we're safe. As long as the children are here, they need us.
Of some persistent sense of large-scale ruin, we keep inventing hope.
These things are not coincidental. We see them way too often. We see them actually every time there is a major event. We could probably all go and find a movie that has the same exact plot line. Now, like I said earlier, this is not a plot line like, oh, it's based on a true story. Well, now it's based on a true story, but it's not coincidental. This is like an insane plot, like that you would not think of. We haven't seen movies like this with these types of plots before. Airborne toxic event from a train accident. Nobody even thinks about trains anymore. The only time we ever think about trains is knowing that we had the train strike that was imminent, that almost happened. That wasn't going to deliver fertilizer and other things. Those types of things, yeah. But I mean, a train accident casting a cloud of chemical waste over the town. It's exactly what's occurring. Airborne toxic event forcing mass evacuation. We just saw the mass evacuation, which led to people having to be quarantined because they came in contact with this substance. Oh, it all sounds very familiar to something else that they were trying to do to everybody around the world. So the fact that this is here, and then you look, and you see other trains derailing, should make everybody suspicious. You have Houston with a train derailment carrying toxic materials, right? We had train derailments in other places like Philadelphia. So this stuff is happening all across the country, and it's not even getting any real attention. Pennsylvania, they had the Norfolk Southern handling of a derailed train. Another one. They're all over the place. If you just look it up, Texas, Houston, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Ever hear stories like this before? All of these trains, this isn't Amtrak, by the way. So if you're thinking and you're just listening to this like it's a podcast, we're not talking about like an Amtrak train that you might take or a subway. We're talking about freight trains, like trains that are carrying toxic chemicals in there. The type of train that you would see on a train track, you'd be like, well, that's an old train. Do they even run those trains anymore? You barely see them drive through because most of the time these trains run at night and they usually carry military equipment. But in this case, they're carrying toxic chemicals. And then once the trains derail conveniently, of course, just like a movie plot in the same place, by the way, the movie that I showed you, the clip from White Noise, was in Ohio. So, I mean, how much more obvious can you get? And they even were reporting, some media outlets were reporting that there people who lived in that town were actually extras in the movie. They got paid to be extras in the movie. So, you know, that's just a coincidence that we're all supposed to believe, right? Because we were all born yesterday, of course. So I'll continue to cover these stories about the train derailments, but seriously, I know that some people don't believe a lot of these stories that they hear. There's some people on the website, they say that they're pretty close to the area. They don't see anything in the sky and stuff like that, which is fine. I'll take people at their word when they say stuff like that. However, if you look at it and you go, well, what is the point of them doing this? Poisoning the water is the answer. Because if they're trying to depopulate, which we all know they're trying to do by any means necessary, right? Get the population under 500 million. Well, we're a long ways from there. They're going to try everything they possibly can to do that. So contaminating water and then drinking contaminated water will kill you. It'll also kill off water supplies for many, many states, which will cause people to have to be dependent on the government for water and emergency care. So those are the agendas tied to it, and they fit perfectly with the narrative that we see going on right now with our world government taking control, doing these things, not stopping, not taking their foot off the gas pedal. One catastrophe after the next catastrophe after the next catastrophe, but it's all the boogeyman. And that's what I always say. It's the boogeyman because they don't have to take blame for any of it. They wipe their hands clean, and they're so arrogant, they don't even address something like this. This is a catastrophe. A catastrophe. You could be talking about millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of people whose water supply is contaminated if that gets into the Ohio River and continues to move. Okay? Not to mention the people in the town who are inhaling this and the animals that were dying. Not to mention that. But the government doesn't address this stuff. But instead, what does our government talk about? Well, how old should you be able to be to decide to cut off your binky? Right? Those are the things that we talk about. It's pure insanity. It's government sabotage being done on purpose. And these are the methods that they use. They use methods where they don't have to take the blame, where they could say, oh, that's ridiculous. That's a conspiracy. Oh, yeah, we derailed the train so that we could do this. It sounds just like it. It sounds like maybe you got the idea from the movie in the first place. Or I guess you released the movie to let everybody know ahead of time so you could give some predictive programming so people would be desensitized to an event like this and say, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds just like that movie. Okay, let me get back to my texting and playing on my phone, my video games, right? And then you can contaminate the water, and you could call people like me and everybody else out there who's very suspicious of this conspiracy theorist because you'll say, that's ridiculous. Why would the government ever do that? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but nobody trusts the government anymore, okay? And it goes both ways because when Trump was in office, the liberals were going nuts about not trusting Trump. Now we have a liberal in office, and this is the most incompetent group of people that have ever existed, ever, in the history of the world that are all running our country. Supposedly. Now, they're all actors. We get that. But they don't even address this stuff. They'll address the most nonsensical, pointless crap. But, you know, potentially having a poisoned water supply, not something they want to talk about on the news. Probably the only thing they should be talking about. But instead, what do they talk about? Crimes, defunding the cops, all this ridiculous nonsense that they create. And again, this is just another thing that they created. I'll keep monitoring the story. I'll be monitoring on the website as well. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families.